Good morning, everyone. As you can see, we're having today's seminar filmed for marketing purposes, so please try not to let the cameras distract you too much. They are as possible in the back there. My name's Ashley. Welcome to our SharePoint seminar today. I'm the Events and Marketing Executive here at Core, and you've probably been hearing a lot from me with emails and calls, so I'll keep the introduction short and sweet. We're going to have a coffee break today at 11:30, so during the break please feel free to check calls, emails. There's also going to be refreshments served just outside the room. Lunch will be served at 12:45, and this brings me to Q&A. So while there's going to be plenty of time to ask questions throughout the presentation, if there is anything that you didn't get to or that you would like to ask of either of our speakers during the break, please do feel free to come and chat to us. There's also myself and Nishat and Sophia as well at the back. If we can please have all mobile phones switched off or on silent, that would be wonderful. If you do need to take calls, obviously find just step outside the room. And the bathrooms are located just through the glass doors. When you came through reception, the glass doors on your right, where the elevators are, there is a code to get back in from the bathrooms. During the breaks, there's always someone there to let you in, so don't worry about it too much, but just in case you do want to write it down, the code is 55 11 33. There are no planned fire drills today, so if you do hear an alarm, this is the real thing. So please follow anyone in a high visibility jacket or the directions of myself and another person from Core. So just a little bit of information about Core and our experience with SharePoint. So we've been living and breathing SharePoint since 2001. We've also been launch partners for every version of Microsoft from 2001 all the way up to 2013, which is something we're very proud of. We also have 4 gold and 2 silver competencies, along with a Cloud Accelerator partner competency. These authorizations are a way of telling what Microsoft partner specialises in, so you know who we'd like to work with, and you can get an idea of their expertise. Our competencies that are related to SharePoint in particular are collaboration in content and digital marketing. Just a couple of awards we've won over the years, just to give you an idea of our expertise. And this slide here is purely a snapshot of our customers just to show the versatility of SharePoint, that it can be used for a whole range of verticals, from insurance firms, sporting clubs, charities, everything really. And Core has experience in most of these verticals. So on that note, I'll pass you over to Amy and Philippa, since I want to see you from today, and I hope you enjoy the event.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Eamon, and this is Philippa. We both work for the consultancy part of the Core team. And from a day-to-day point of view, what does that mean? That means that we have the privilege to go out on site, to meet customers like yourselves, to deliver SharePoint solutions, to help customers take SharePoint and do what they can to get the maximum value from SharePoint. As you'll see today, it's a massive product. There's so much we can do with it. And really our objective today is to share the experience that we've had. We've both been working with SharePoint since the 2001 edition. So we've seen the good, the bad and the ugly, and really we want today to be about sharing that experience and getting whatever feedback we can from you guys as we go through. So please do, if you have questions, if there's things you want to hear about, please do jump in. We're more than happy to take questions as we go. So SharePoint itself, it's been around a long time. Since 2001 we've had 5 variations of the product. And for those of you who might have been through some of those variations, you'll have seen that it had different focuses as it moved through each of those products. It started off very much as a document management in 2001. In 2003, a much bigger focus on a collaborative view of what SharePoint could do started coming in. And really from those versions onwards, it's been merging those capabilities. And today really is about what's 2013 and what does that bring to the party. It'd be very useful for me, by the way, and for us as we go through, just to get a feel for the experience in the room. I know some of you have given us feedback in terms of what you're looking for in the session today, and we're going to make sure we incorporate that into the session. But just a matter of interest, if I can get a show of hands, who in the room has used some of the earlier editions, SharePoint 2001 or 2003? We've got any veterans in the room? Okay, so nobody's got that, has got the scars from that early on. What about SharePoint 2007? Anybody using 2007? Okay. 2010? And anybody in 2013 yet? Okay, so 2 or 3. Another question that I'd like to get a feel for and really help us focus what today is about, in terms of what people are looking for, how many people in the room would say they're looking for a general introduction to SharePoint? What is it? What does it do? I hope some at least, but okay, so at least 2/3 are looking for it. And that's good news, because that's very much our focus today. I will talk now, and I'll probably talk again at the end. We do separate sessions called Breakfast Bites, which are done in our Core's offices in Aldgate. And those sessions are 1-hour sessions. They're 8:30 to 9:30, and they're quite deep dive on particular topics. So we do them on very basic, what is SharePoint, through to quite detailed, how you design a SharePoint site, how you do the CSS and so on. So there's a number of sessions, and that's come from some of the feedback that we've got at this session. This session is broad brush. This is about doing, as somebody called it on feedback recently, it's SharePoint 101. It's a feel for what it is. There are areas where we will jump over things because of time, but we want to make sure we've covered the full product and give you a view to what it is and what it can do. So 2013, if I left you one final message this morning that you took away, and this is going to sound like a strange one of the key things myself and Philippa have concluded about SharePoint 2013 is that it works. And you probably all say, I hope it works, and invest in the thing. But it does work, and it works very well. Not saying that anybody, and I can see some customers in the room that I've worked on SharePoint 2003 and 2007 with in the past. Not saying those versions didn't work, but anybody who's been on the older versions will know that at some point you get into some very heavy lifting to customize maybe front end look and feel, maybe how you want document management to work. And that has always been a little bit of a challenge when we're trying to manage budgets and trying to manage an effective delivery of SharePoint in the past. In 2013, we were pretty much all struck by how much you could do straight out of the box. And that's a phrase you'll hear a lot, certainly a phrase you'll hear a lot of us when we consult. What can it do out of the box? How do we get maximum value? At what point do we have to get into customization or even heavy configuration? And I think from 3 particular areas in my mind is where we think it works, really comes through. And that's our message all the way through, it works. So what are those 3 areas? Firstly, device. We now have the first version of SharePoint that truly works device-centric and across multiple devices. You know, even our own website is currently the SharePoint 2010 release, and we're currently looking at, as we speak, of upgrading it. Jackie is in the room, our marketing manager, who's helping us drive that. And one of the drivers for us is to make it more device friendly. So we're using 2013 as it will work well with devices. And God forbid, I know I'm in a Microsoft building, I shouldn't even be showing an iPad, but you know, if you're using an iPad, a Surface, a Windows Phone, it's going to work. And for us, our design team, it just means, yes, we have less work to do to make that device to work. So cross-device, tick in the box. In terms of application, we now have what we believe is the first cross-application version of SharePoint. So whether you're using Outlook, whether you're using multiple browsers, Firefox, Chrome, etc. In fact, I shouldn't say this, and I will, again, in the Microsoft building, but you know, we find sometimes that Firefox probably works better than IE, so go figure that. We've had definitely experiences cross-browser. Not saying you won't still find little issues here and there as browsers move, but what we're finding is a pervasiveness across browsers. The Office piece, I think, is very interesting. Clients in the past have asked us, should we upgrade the Office suite because we're upgrading SharePoint? So for customers going from SharePoint, from SharePoint 2003 to 2007, often we got asked, should we also do the Office suite? You know, we've been told this is the right thing to do. And our advice in the past has always been, look at what it gives you and then decide. Because for some customers, the benefit of the additional features in Office and the integration with SharePoint weren't quite exactly what they were looking for. And there were third-party tools that did that. In 2013, it's the first time we categorically recommend you should upgrade at the same time. Microsoft have made it technically easier to do. Clearly there are back-end issues in terms of training and so on and cost, but in terms of pure integration, what we want to highlight today is how smooth the integration between Office 2013 and SharePoint 2013 is. And finally, platform. The ability to decide where you implement SharePoint, how you cost SharePoint, how you pay for SharePoint. Whether you want to use SharePoint on-premise within your own organization, in a hosted organization where you own the licensing, or if you want to use the cloud or a hybrid. SharePoint is perfectly configured at this point to do all 3. And we have a number of customers who, for different reasons, are doing mixtures. They have SharePoint on-premise for their older or legacy, and maybe they're upgrading that, but they're also doing extranets and so on using the Office 365 SharePoint Online edition, which we'll talk about shortly. So again, you as a customer have the choice of which way you deliver that. So a lot of flexibility, and that's probably one of the key messages. It works. So what are we going to cover today? We've covered the introduction, but there's 3 sections left in this morning's session. The first 2 we're going to do before the break. The first 2 are about setting the scene, tell you a little bit about the background of SharePoint. We'll also do an overview of the product itself, and we'll step into each of the key components of the product, talk a little bit about them, and then we'll do a breakdown on some examples of what SharePoint is. So section 3, just before the break, will be about each of the individual elements and a technical breakdown, show you some demos and give you a feature view of SharePoint. However, after the break, we find it's better that we take the feature view and put it into a story. So after the break, we'll do a day in the life. We'll do an end-to-end example of a real-world working of SharePoint. And what you'll be seeing in that session is a repeat of some of the demos you've seen earlier and a slight extension to those. Again, as I say, that we obviously have a structure we're working through. If there are areas that you'd like us to talk about, questions you want, please feel free to stop us as we go. Okay, so again, I recognise many faces in the room today, and some of you have been at some of our sessions in the past, and you'll have seen us do this SharePoint Pi. And this kind of stayed pretty similar for the last few versions of SharePoint, and this was the old representation based on the segments of SharePoint. I think one of the first key changes is that Pi is gone. We now have a very different view of the product, which is much more solution focused.
So this is the new marketing platform for SharePoint, the new way that Microsoft sell it. Broken down into the 5 main components, the focus is switched from being the functional components within the Pi to being the roles you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve from it. So the first one being share, and it is the biggest for a reason, it's the primary part of SharePoint. So it's around sharing your content and your files and your pages and so on, but it's also sharing knowledge, ideas and that sort of thing, bringing your organisation together and getting it working better together. To do that, to do it well, your structure needs to be well organised. People need to be able to know where they're going and find the things they're after. And the organised area is really around building that structure. So it's your typical enterprise content management features. So your columns and metadata, the taxonomy you can wrap around it, your hierarchy and structure, the different types of content you can store, and how you organise it to make sure it's logical and works. And then obviously to be able to find it, you need a discover piece. Now, the simple part of this is search, and the search has moved on considerably, so it's a very, very powerful story now, with some really lovely new features that are available. But there's also some other things in there. So there's a new feature called communities, which is really around kind of getting teams, communities of practice working better together, discovering knowledge and so on. And then those 3 are the kind of the 3 core ones, and they're the ones we'll focus on mostly in this overview. Build is really taking what SharePoint offers and doing more. So it's the adding on to what the platform gives you. So there's things in there about the development methodologies, how you can brand it, how you can look after your translations if you're wanting info and so on. So it's really taking it to the next level, which we'll touch on briefly. And then manage is looking after it. So it's once you're up and running, you've got your infrastructure, it's looking after your licenses, your servers, your users, making sure that it stays and takes long. There's some really nice features there, and Emma mentioned the breakfast bites, and we do one specifically on manage, so we won't really go into any of that detail about kind of the underlying infrastructure today, but we do breakfast bites on that if it's of interest.
Okay, so looking at some of the background, really just want to position the product, talk a little bit about licensing and so on. It's quite a big topic in itself, so we're not going to spend too much on it. But also, we want to give you a view of how you can procure it in terms of versions of SharePoint. And it's always been a little bit complicated, and it's probably more complicated now, but for good reason. This diagram really shows us the 2 variations we have. On the left-hand side, we have the on-premise edition. And again, just for those who are probably brand new to SharePoint, we'll use this phrase a wee bit today, and by on-premise, we're referring to when you go out and buy the license, you install it in your environment, and you own that license. It's a one-off purchase, and then you own SharePoint as a product set. To do that, you buy the server license, and you also then buy user access license for each of the users you want to use internally. On the right-hand right-hand side we have the online edition, SharePoint Online, which is part of the Office 365 suite. So the Microsoft Cloud offering is called Office 365. If you buy Office 365, you get SharePoint as a component. If you buy SharePoint Online separately, then that's the only component you get. So you have a choice of the suite, or you can get SharePoint separately. In terms of the variations, SharePoint on-premise, there is standard and enterprise. And the online edition has a similar mapping, and we'll show a slide of that in a second to show you feature parity. I think one of the key points we want to get across in this slide are a couple of very simple points. One is one of the key changes from SharePoint 2010. Two of the big additional costs that people had in 2010 release when they extended the functionality of SharePoint related to search and external access. So let me start with external access. If in the 2010 release you wanted to use SharePoint as your intranet, sorry, other way around, internet, or even extranet, you wanted to expose it out to the outside world. So you built your website, or you built a public-facing element of your site. If you wanted to expose that out in SharePoint 2010, you had to buy what was called a FIS, F-I-S license, or SharePoint for Internet Sites. And depending on your licensing model, that wasn't overly cheap. It was a per server, and it ranged from enterprise, which was 40k a server, down to maybe 7 or 8, again, depending on how licensing. So it was a pretty significant cost. And particularly when we look at how powerful SharePoint is, excuse me, as a content management system, a lot of our clients said it's a fantastic content management system. We can see the power of what we can do with it from a web perspective, but cost was a wee bit prohibitive. One of the first key messages that we want to get across is that's now gone. SharePoint, you can expose the internal version of SharePoint free of charge to an unlimited number of external people. So long as you have it licensed internally, you can now expose that externally. Some use the technology to do that or whatever, but fundamentally the FIS license is gone. It's free to expose SharePoint externally. The search piece was the second piece. That was FAST. Microsoft procured FAST a number of years ago, and FAST is a search technology that they incorporated into SharePoint. In the 2010 release, it was an additional license set. There were no extra user licenses, but you paid a per server license, and I know we have a customer in the room who's purchased that. And that really brought search alive. So if you were doing knowledge management, if you're doing some heavy intense search over and above the normal search SharePoint provided, it was almost a no-brainer, and I would say probably 50% of our clients who bought 2010 at some point bought the FAST add-on. Not so good news for those guys, but very good news to an A13 people, is that FAST and the FAST product set is now part of the base SharePoint implementation, and we'll be showing examples of that today. So both of those were removed and are put into the base product. So the only addition to talk, oops, not too far. The only addition to talk about is we now have a number of additional products that have come in. Some on the on-premise side and some on the online side. So on the on-premise side, we have a brand new feature called Audit and Control Management Server. And that's really Microsoft's recognition of the power of SharePoint as a business and a line of business tool. We're members of the Business Critical team, what's called a Business Critical program with Microsoft, which is helping clients deliver business critical solutions. And one of the challenges with business critical solutions is the use of products like Excel and Access to hold really key business information. With Audit Control Management Server, which is run from SharePoint pervasive across your Microsoft estate, it helps us manage and control and audit all of those kind of files that might have key information. You'll see it built into things like Outlook. If you're starting to send emails out that have credit card information and so on, it will immediately start to block you and say, do you know you're doing this? You know, it's starting to look at the content and so on, and it's auditing the fact that you've done it. Even if you do allow it, it then audits the fact that you've done it. So it's putting control into that type of information. It is an extension, it's an add-on product. We also have a number of Azure and Duet, which is for those of you in staff products that are being added on. So in summary, on-premise, some major changes in terms of new products and products that are no longer costed but part of the product. The online edition really is where we will spend a little bit of time this morning, and I'm going to hand to Philip to give you a comparison difference. But if I can summarise my key points about it online, in previous releases of SharePoint, particularly SharePoint 2010, online lagged behind on-premise in terms of both the release cycles and also technology. There still is feature differences between them, and some things you can do in one or the other. So online has things that you can only do in an online, or you can do it certainly more effectively. And equally, there are some features in on-premise you can only do in on-premise, and sometimes that's part of the reason of why people do both. But the online edition, if I leave you know, the message is very much Microsoft focus moving forward. That's the product that is the key. Everything is going to be delivered online first, and certainly delivering solutions online is certainly a very cost-effective way of doing it. So what about feature difference?
So this slide kind of gives you an idea of the different versions. You will be getting slide deck, so you'll be able to look at this in a little bit more detail. But it's broadly split into the on-premise and online splits. The key columns look at the standard enterprise versus the plan 1 and plan 2. They're kind of the equivalents from the on-prem to the online. And in the simple world, hopefully you can see how similar we are. They're really, really close now. There used to be quite a difference between products, but they've really begun to align. There are a few different differences. So one of the big ones is things around the scorecards, dashboards, the high-end BI using the performance point. That's still on premise. But there is in the roadmap a new feature coming to the online version called Power BI, which will actually take the online version up to level and then give some really nice features. So they will be shifting that. One of the features that Emma mentioned that's online only is the external sharing. And that's not to say that you can't share content externally on premise. It's just a little more effort. You have to control your accounts, to control the access yourself. Online, it's there for you. It's very easy to do. We'll actually be demoing it later, so we'll show you how that feature works. So the two products are very, very similar and very closely aligned to each other. So the biggest question is which one to go down. And in the past, it was always kind of looking at on-premise first, and then considering online if it was an option, if it was a potential. Now it's really the other way around. It's saying, look online, that's your first point of call, and decide why should you go on-premise. If you need to, then come back. And these are the main reasons why you should consider the on-premise option. Business intelligence, as I said, the high-end performance point is in SharePoint on-premise enterprise edition. That doesn't mean there's no BI online. You still get Excel services, video services, there's some Power Views, all that sort of stuff. It just means the really top level one is on-premise only. Cross-site publishing, I won't go into detail now, and it's going to explain it a little bit later. It's a very powerful feature, and that's on-premise only. Again, enterprise edition. Heavy customization, complex BCS that's connecting to back-end databases. The key words for both those are heavy and complex. They're both doable and fine. They're fine. They are capable to do it. But if you want a full online business system, very heavy coding, very heavy customization, it might just be easier and quicker and more efficient to do it on-premise, so that you kind of need to weigh up what you're actually trying to use SharePoint for. Your licenses, infrastructure, if you already own it, if you've got it on servers already, it's probably just cheaper to keep it there rather than moving. And then finally, compliance rules. There are loads of external accreditations that might be powerful for the Office 365 platform. It is very secure, it's very compliant, but you may just have rules that you can't go out there. So for any government people in the room, IL3 isn't allowed only. If you've got rules around it, mustn't leave UK borders or anything like that, then you can't go online. So there might just be some compliance rules. But thankfully, the list is actually very small, and most people find that online is good enough for them.
I think the final comment about online and on-premise that it is a tough decision. You certainly can do a hybrid mix of them, and it's one that we work with a lot of clients to try and help them understand what the best mix, what the best migration strategy, particularly for existing customers. You also should be aware that it's a key shift. The word cadence is used a lot. They want to be changing how they release stuff. And I think with SharePoint Online, we're seeing with SharePoint releases coming every 90 days as opposed to a 3-year cycle. And that for us is certainly good news. You know, I'm personally tired of in older versions of SharePoint saying, when asked does it do X, saying no, but we know it's in the next release. When's the next release? 2.5 years from now. And that's a long time to wait for somebody, and do we customize it? So now we're able to say, is it the next release? Yes, it is, and that's a month and a half away, 2 months away. Again, with our Microsoft partnership, we work with our existing clients to say what features they're looking for, and we have a very strong connection to the product team in Redmond to let us know when those things are coming, so we can look at that. We'll be interested in the amount of interest. Is anybody here using the online version of SharePoint or tried it at all? Okay, not that many. Interestingly, from our point of view, what we're seeing, if I asked the same question about Core a year and a half ago, and we're about a year and a half now into this release, I think, give or take. If I looked at it at that point, or maybe slightly earlier in the 2010 release, I would say 1 in 10 customers was considering an element of online, but that was about as much as we had. And we did an exercise about a month ago at one of our marketing meetings where we the client of the last 6 months, and we just put them in 2 columns. Not in terms of project size, just names. And even we were surprised by that the list were almost 50-50 in terms of clients who were doing just solely on-prem, clients were doing online. So there's certainly a key mix between the two. An interesting discussion point to be had around which way you go. We are doing an Office 365 seminar which covers Office 365 in general, the tool set, and it covers the online edition. And again, you'll see details of that a wee bit later. Okay, so share. That's the background done, the introduction done. So for the next while, until the first break, we're going to try and do each of the segments. So we'll do share, organise and design, or SOD is my acronym to remember. It might be a wee bit unfortunate, but you know, the delivery elements of SharePoint, SOD, share, organise and design, the main elements of what you can do with SharePoint. We'll do those 3 sections. We'll do a brief overview of build, as Philip talked about, and we'll also touch on manage. We have a breakfast bite about how you install and manage SharePoint, which is something separate. So what's share about? Again, Philip has done a brief introduction, but really this is the entry point to SharePoint. It is about sharing content, sharing IP, sharing ideas, and putting people together. And the tools that we now have in 2013 is really about waking that up and again, tapping into not just the documents that traditionally SharePoint and file shares have been good at doing, and now tapping into the people. And that's been a vision and an objective of SharePoint for many years. I just don't think the technology was right, or even the climate was ready for it. Now we're seeing some really, really exciting projects where customers are using some of the more social features, and we'll talk and show about them shortly, to really engage with both their customers, their internal teams, partners, etc., into kind of one big experience. And that's very much what Share is about. You know, if we strip it open and we say, what are we doing under the Share banner? We're really doing one of 3 things. We're creating customer intranets. What's an intranet? Everybody, I could ask everybody in the room, what is an intranet? Probably get a slightly different version. You know, somebody's intranet might be document management, another person's intranet might be how they collaborate together. But fundamentally, intranets are the core and hub of what we're doing. Also, extranets and websites. Very much our use of 2013, and one of our first reasons we migrated to 2013 wasn't for our own internal use, it was for external use. So our project portals that we do on every one of our projects, the ability to use SharePoint Online to have an external extranet, that means we can invite people in without having to set up complex accounts, give them very direct access to either complete project sites or even just the individual files. It just streamlined our life. And you know, eat your own dog food, I think is the phrase, but really for 2013 was the first time that we galloped into making sure we were using the product, and because of the features it gave us. So extranet is a massive feature. SharePoint Online particularly really lights that up. And websites. SharePoint Online has a public free website, but in general the content management capability in SharePoint is what we're trying to highlight here. A number of our customers interestingly come in and do one of these things, but quite a few will end up doing more than one. And quite a significant number actually do all 3. And hopefully there's an obvious reason to do that. It's a cost issue. We now have one platform, one technology, so it's a cost saving. But cost is one thing, but actually for me and for us, what we're seeing is the benefit of doing all 3 is training and user experience. Having customers, and we have a number of customers now that when they create content, articles, whatever it is in SharePoint Intranet, they have the ability now to automatically tag and make that content available in a streamlined way straight onto either the extranet or the website. It's a one-time experience. And even when it's not that streamlined, in fact, it's the same experience doing something in the internal experience as it is the external experience. So it's just adoption cycles are why people are doing that. In terms of the type of use, again, we'll show some examples of this today, but from an internet perspective, we're looking at SharePoint as a collaboration tool, as a document management tool, as a knowledge management tool, and then as we get a little bit more complex, we're turning it into a line of business tool. Now, customers who are branding to SharePoint will probably start simple collaboration, etc. But the vast majority of our experience with customers is that it becomes pivotal to what customers do. It's the heart, the hub of what they do. And a number of our larger customers are doing full end-to-end case management with SharePoint. Be that, for example, one of our insurance customers, where they now do their complete end-to-end underwriting using SharePoint as the front end. This is called the European, actually, I think it's the official phrase, the European Underwriting Desktop or something like that. So SharePoint becomes the hub of what they do. It's not replacing back-end ERP systems, it's just providing a single view interface to them, one space. So it has the ability to go from something very simple, collaborative, right into it's what we do. And again, that's some of the excitement that we have about working with the product, seeing it morph and seeing it move between those different experiences. In terms of SharePoint as an intranet, some very high-level stats. I'm not sure if anybody here subscribed or has bought the Nielsen Norman Group's internet paper. They do an internet paper once a year. The 2013 one is now out, and it's a review of what they believe are the top 10 intranets worldwide. So they spend the year evaluating, picking the top 10, and then recommend why they were the top 10. Very, very interesting article. I highly recommend if you are about building an internet, you want to know ideas and so on. Certainly, we'll happily talk to you about the ideas of what we've done with our customers. But this particular report, as I say, it is a paid-for report, so I can only show you some parts today. But the paid-for report goes into a lot of detail about what worked, what didn't work, why it worked, why it didn't work, kind of team sizes, the structures, the governance. Very, very interesting document. It's huge. It's 400 pages of a lot of detail. It's bedtime reading if you want, but well worth having a look at. But I thought, interestingly, a couple of stats that come from it. In the last 2 editions, it stayed at the same, the last 2 versions, last year and this year. SharePoint now accounts for 70% of all of the internets in there. And in fact, it's slightly higher. One of the other ones had SharePoint in there, but it wasn't the main focus, but it was being used. So it's pretty much all of the key intranets in the top 10, SharePoint is being used. The other thing that for me is interesting is the kind of common themes that people are doing, and I have no intention of really going through this in detail. The document itself, there is a summary, by the way, on the Nielsen Norman site. They give you a 4 or 5 page summary, which in itself is worth looking at, and it covers some of this. So the additional details in the report. But some of the key things that, these were the top themes that were in all of the intranets that won. The reason that we're putting this up here is that SharePoint does all of these straight out of the box. So that used to be a challenge for us back in the 03 days, the 2007 days. In some of these it did, and they did badly. I've got a customer in the room where metadata filtering and how you manage content. Back in 2007 days, or earlier than that, the ability to do good metadata, good filtering, and make it usable throughout SharePoint was tricky. It supported metadata, but not in the way that businesses needed to use it. So we've had some fairly major change. In terms of personalization, I think for me, I found this interesting, and that's how they phrase it in the report, and that's how we phrase personalization. The ability to create a personalized view, a targeted view, so when people move around SharePoint, it's adapting to them, without it being their ability to completely change it themselves. So a governed, personalized view, very much part of what people are trying to do. And then the final thing, which I think is interesting, just to note, down at the end, mobile. I was probably the only thing I was really surprised with this report was to think how little mobile featured. Every conversation we're having seems to be about, can you make SharePoint mobile friendly? And the answer is yes. But interestingly, in the 2013 release of this report, mobile was in there, but only on one case where they very specifically gone and created a mobile experience as well as an internet. Maybe that's the fact it's an internet, but it was an interesting stat. Not to suggest that SharePoint doesn't support mobile experiences. It certainly does in 2013, but it was quite low down. So I would highly recommend you have a look at that. So what's new? And again, one of the key things we want to do in this section this morning before the break is do on the 5 key areas what's actually changed. So again, unfortunately, for those of you that are new to SharePoint, some of this will be, well, so what is new anyway, but for those of you who haven't, it's what's the key big change? And I think one of the first things is the UI, and I'll show the UI in a second, but I've actually kept the old name Metro. I think they're not allowed to use that anymore, so I think they changed the slides. It's the modern user interface is what it's called now. So the UI and the pervasiveness of the UI, or the word I'm hearing a lot, convergence, the fact that they all look the same is the first key message. Social, Generation Y, I think as I've heard it referred to as brand central social, is now SharePoint. And there's a number of options. Yammer is one of them, and we're not specifically going to go into Yammer itself today. We will have a separate spot on Yammer and the social tool that is Yammer and what that does. What we will focus on is the concept of social networking within SharePoint and the tools that are available. But very much as a massive shift in terms of how people are using the tool set. Sharing externally, I think, is one of the biggest features. It's so simple. It's one of the reasons why we moved, and I would say it's for at least 20-30% of our customers. It's one of the reasons why they moved very quickly to the 2013 release. Public site, Phil will give you some examples of SharePoint as a public site. The navigation has changed dramatically in a number of ways, which we'll talk about later, including something called cross-site publishing, which again I do a quick discussion on at the end of the next set of demos. Okay, so what we're going to do now is give you an end-to-end demo of some of the key features that we believe are in the shared experience. Okay. Okay, so here I am. I'm logged on to the site. This is the sites area. Yes, I'm on the sites area. This is the sites area SharePoint. The first thing we want to highlight is the UI, so the user interface. So you can see we've got the modern user interfaces. It's now called tiles. Anybody who's using Windows Phone? Any Windows phones? People in the room? From someone picking it? No? Okay. Nobody will be happy to hear that. And if I pop back to Philippa's machine, also the Windows 8 desktop or Windows 8.1 desktop, as I'm sure anybody who's using Windows 8 is looking at. So I think again what we're trying to suggest is that the research and definitely our feeling in SharePoint is that when people jump around, they felt they were jumping into different tools. A lot of work's been done to say they should look the same, should act the same. So convergence, key message here. Do they look the same? Do they act the same? So this is the sites feature. And the sites feature, in my mind, also fixes a problem that I've had. Also fixes a navigational problem that I felt belonged in SharePoint in the past. Again, for those of you who use SharePoint, you'll probably have looked at SharePoint as a project tool, maybe your clients in your collaborations. You may have looked at SharePoint as a My Site, which we'll touch on in a second, a personalized view of SharePoint. You might have a home page, an intranet, an extranet. What you're actually building is a number of entry points. And very quickly we found that people were unsure of what's the right way to get into SharePoint. I know some of our customers, and again there's one in the room that said, we'll just build a very simple home page with a search box on it, almost Google-esque, and that's where we'll get people in. And that's fine, and that probably, those kind of customers are the ones that got the best out of saying, well, we'll get them in to one place and then drive them to the right place. But genuinely, a lot of customers, what we did our research when we heard SharePoint's not working that well, when we went out and met the teams, they were confused of where to go, where do I go to find things. So sites is probably the first way of solving that in my mind. So what is sites? Firstly, there's a menu bar at the top that always has sites on it. Any of the menu bars you see across the top, whether the Outlook, the calendar, the people, they can all be customized and removed very easily, but this is what it looks like default out of the box. And we get two experiences, one that's driven by me, which is giving me power, and one that's driven by the administrator. So across the top I have these tiles that show me 4 directed areas that the administrator wants me to go to. And I can change that person by person and so on. Now I have enough rights, by the way, to change this, but the average user will just get a list of tiles. So here I'm being directed towards a public site, an intranet, a community area, which we'll talk about later, and a team site. And I'll show those in a second. What's down here is stuff that I have control over. So these are the areas these are the sites, and these are the areas in SharePoint that I'm following. And in our real world, this is a demo site obviously, by the way, but in our real world, I find this genuinely, I talked about this before I used it, which is maybe 2 years ago, and I had the vision that I said that'd be good. Genuinely, in terms of actually using SharePoint and following the key things I'm doing, and it needs a bit of looking after, it needs a bit of training, and you say, how hard is it to train? It's not very hard, but awareness of what the power is. For me, it just means I always click on the site buttons, and within seconds, even though we have a huge SharePoint estate, we've been running SharePoint now for 12 years, I can get to what I need very quickly, very easily. So it's my home. And you'll see me doing it today a lot as I navigate around the place. When I'm lost, for want of a better word, I click on sites and it brings me back to my safe haven, my home. So what else have I got on here? We have an intranet. I'll just briefly click on it. Philip will dive into a little bit more on this in a second, but this is my intranet. Again, I click on sites to get me back home. I have a communities area, I have a team site. Nothing too exciting on here. We'll talk a lot about them, particularly in the day of the life section later. We have a public site. I think you demo this shortly. I'm not sure if this is the one you demo, but this is the one. So here we have a core team site. Now you can see I've lost the ribbon because we've completely taken it away here, so I can only back button in this case. But again, that's configurable and controllable. And then I have a few other bits and pieces. So what's next, and what's the next kind of key feature? The next key feature from our perspective is the whole My Site area, the whole newsfeed area. And this is a game changer. It's certainly a cultural game changer. Not every organisation is ready for what this is about and what it's going to bring to an organisation, but we've seen some fairly massive change in organisations that have adopted it. So this is I suppose, a halfway house between Outlook and communication in an Outlook world to an instant messaging. It's about creating another messaging paradigm. And we again are using it, and we'll show examples in a real world scenario of how we're seeing customers use it. We've got some customers who have taken some initiatives like projects and things they're doing and stopped using email for particular initiatives and only used this feature to try and stop this flow of emails, this losing of emails and losing context. again, we'll try and explain that in a little more detail. This is a page that kind of tells me what's going on. So it's on the right-hand side, I can see the people I'm following. So we have very much a LinkedIn, Facebook type experience now. Who am I following in the organisation? So I click on that and see the people I'm following. And as I search, as I navigate around, I can find a document, I can find an author, I can click follow anywhere within to now follow that author. So if I found somebody that's written a very interesting document on SharePoint or whatever it is that I'm interested in, I can now follow both the document and the person, and I'll now start to get updates on that person. If I can also follow documents. So these are the documents that I'm currently in the organisation. So if I'm in the finance team and I've asked all the board of directors to give me updates to the financial figures, I'll start following the document, and as they're updating, tagging it and working that document, the newsfeed will start telling me what's going on with that document. Newsfeed, by the way, just beware, also links to Outlook. So you can have it so that when something appears in the feed, you will get a message in Outlook, but it's always dragging you back. When you click on any of the links, it brings you back straight into SharePoint. And finally, we have tags. Again, a very interesting topic for me in that I can start tagging interests that I have within the business. I can not just a person, but I can tag that I'm interested in marketing, I'm interested in SharePoint, whatever it is I'm interested in. And we now have knowledge management built in that I was really even thinking about it. We're now building knowledge around what we do, our IP as a business. And again, watching that grow from customers who start day one to 6 months later, it's pretty impressive to watch that grow, and it's pretty organic. As long as we get the right message and training in there, people get to use this pretty quickly. In the middle section, I have the newsfeed itself, which is a discussional forum that I can start talking and interacting with people. So I have 3 views that you can see on the screen right now. I have a following view, I have an everyone view, and I have a mentions. So on the following view, that's specifically me saying, I'm following a number of people. You can see I'm following 7 people. I will only see activity for those 7 people. The everyone view is showing me messages and only messages that come from anybody in the building. So I've heard the everyone aligned to, is that like the global message saying I want to sell my car and so on. And to a degree, I suppose that's what it is. And it's also configured around it being very transient. The notes in the everyone section don't stay there that long. You can configure that, but it's about it being just quick messages. The following, however, is more important to me, and I will see not just the post. So here we can see Philippa, who I do follow, has sent me a message. But I also can see that Philippa is now following herself a document. So I'm following Philippa. This morning she went and followed a document, and my newsfeed's telling me that she's followed that. So if I'm nosy, I can find out why she's following that. Is that of interest to me? And hopefully it's more than just nosiness. I never knew that existed. And that's about connecting people to the content. So again, I find this really, really useful. I at least once or twice a week ago, I'd never have known it was even there. It's through the newsfeed that I found that it's somebody connecting me to something without me even knowing. The mentions, and just something that's happened, I think Philip is probably playing behind the scenes. The mentions just has a little marker on it at the minute. It has the 1 symbol there. That tells me in real time that actually a mention has appeared, that I can look at a new post. If I click on that, I'll just show you what that is. That's where I've been mentioned in a post. And what's a mention? A mention is, so if I'm going to send a newsfeed update now, but I'm going to mention Philippa. So I'm going to say, someone at Philippa. And the at mention, by the way, as I type the at symbol and type P, it will automatically filter into the address book and find Philip on the list. So I created a post. So I've created a general post, and I don't want to overly complicate this because we talk more about this as we go through. I'm doing a very general post. Anybody will see this post in the everyone section, but I've specifically put at Philippa, so she's going to get it in her mention section. She'll also get an email, because everything that goes into the mention section automatically goes into an email. So Philip will get this email, and I'm going to prove that point, I hope.
Yeah.
So Philip should now see that mention.
So you can go for 1 because I follow Evan, so it's coming there as well, but it's also in my mentions, and there's my email. So my email has popped up saying the message as well, so that's coming to my inbox. So it comes in and it's directing me to this new post. It's come to me, it's a question to me, and I can respond straight away.
So again, in summary, following is anything related to the people I follow, I will get back in. So all of the messages, the activities, the tagging, the follows, if I'm following a group of people, which actually means you can choose your followers wisely. You know, you don't want to follow everyone in the business because you're going to get a lot of activity. So it is a case of following key team members, following different people and so on. And you can start linking this to external follows and so on. So it is about building a way of doing that. In terms of, there we go, I've got my message back. So we've done that. You notice there's likes, there's replies, there's all that kind of facility built in. The everyone is just that general postings that are done to everybody. And interestingly, you will say, well, isn't everything a general post? The answer is no. And in the day in the life section we do after the break, we can do posts that are project or site specific, so they now stay within the site context. And we'll explain that in a minute. So you can have areas that are global and areas that are very tied off just to areas that you want them to be. I say the mentions are my key things. I also, by the way, in a feature of SharePoint and the Office product set now is that you see the ellipse, the 3 dots everywhere, and Microsoft will give you the 3 most common used, and then the menu will drop you down the other options. So we also have activities. So these will show me my activities. So it's almost me showing me the activities that people will see when they look at my personal site. And we also have likes. So these are things that I've liked. So again, as I go around SharePoint, as I bookmark things as a like, they'll appear here. So again, it's a way of me controlling and managing the content very simply, very easily. And that's something, again, I've noticed with both the training programs we do and working with customers in terms of rollout. With relatively sensible but minimal training, people are picking up the concepts very quickly and running with it and connecting the information that they never did in previous releases of SharePoint. A couple of last points. Again, if I do another post, I'll just do one last quick post. So I do hi all, bit of a nonsense post. I'll do the app mentions again, and I'll do somebody else this time. So Sarah, and I'll do the hashtag, and I'll start typing, and it's now giving me a list of hashtags, so I'm going to pick marketing. And again, when I post this, it will, as well as going to a general post, it will very specifically target Sarah, because I put Sarah in there, but also anybody who's following the marketing topic within SharePoint will now get a mention and get a follow, get an update. So again, it's about me being able to bring in people without really even knowing I've done that. So it's very, very simple, very, very easy. A feature I really like is the richness of the content. So you can see we're posting, I can attach documents and so on. I can put URL links. And Philippa, gave. So I asked, can anybody help? So I asked, you did actually, Philippa, has anybody got any useful decks on SharePoint? So we did some hashtagging here and so on. Sarah's responded. She's actually URL the document from within SharePoint. So she grabbed the URL, which is very easy to do now, and we'll show that a wee bit later. Grabbing URLs and content, which is quite difficult. Very simple idea, but very difficult in previous releases. Now it's intuitive, and you can see that example in a second. So this document, which is a PowerPoint document, I can click on that document and it'll open it directly, but I now also have the ability to view inline. So using what's called the Office Web Apps facility of 2013, it will now run the document, be it Word, Excel, and so on. And you'll see when we look at search, it goes even further. It starts pulling content out of the document in this view and saying, do you want to jump to these areas of the document as opposed to just a general view. And that, again, for those of us, when I've worked with many customers in the past, it's been, search is great, and some of this stuff is great, but I'll go to the document. It's one extra step. What can I see without going an extra click? That's now been solved. I should mention that we're using the Office, the SharePoint Online edition, so our demos here are all full SharePoint Online, so everything that we're running here is running from the cloud and in terms of Microsoft install base. The thing that's doing this preview is the Office Web Apps component. Sort of you touch on a little bit later about how that's configured, but it's Office Web Apps running through SharePoint that is doing them. So in simple terms, that gives a very, very high level view of the central sites, some of the things we can do in terms of newsfeed, and when we look at day in the life, we'll take that to the next level. How do we put that to real world use?
So we'll do a little bit more around kind of the content features and so on. So I'm going to start by explaining the site, because we're talking about sites quite a lot. So I'll go to my sites area and pick one of the sites from here, so the marketing site, find it. And just do a little bit of background about what we mean when we're talking about the site. So the sales marketing site is a site within SharePoint, and you use the sites to build your structure up. this is my site. It's about sales marketing, so it's targeted at individual the sales marketing team or people finding out about sales marketing. And I hit the homepage and I'm looking at key content. So this is content that's been exposed to me as I hit the page. So I've got a PowerPoint slide deck that's using the same Office web apps that we were just showing. It's just this time it's embedded in the page. So the PowerPoint slide deck is in SharePoint. It's embedded in the page. I can flip through it and see the slide deck running in here. I don't have to go and open the document. I've got some calendars, some events, and I've got some documents and a little bit of KPIs going on here. Behind this, I look at the site contents. This is all the content that I've got in my site, and the contents are your different repositories for holding things. So I've got an announcements list, I've got my document library that was on the homepage, and discussions board, and so on. So these are all pots of content that are inside that site, and there might be 10, 15 pages to show that out. What the homepage is doing, and all the pages are doing, is really exposing different views of that content. I could come in straight in here and just always go into the full document library and see all my documents, as opposed to seeing them on that homepage. So the site is the page, and it's what you're targeting out to people, but it's also all those little pots behind it. So when we're talking about sites, it's those sort of collections and controls we're talking about. And in terms of what you've got on the homepage and what people see, very, very flexible, very easy. I'm going to put this page into edit mode, so having the right permissions to be able to do that. And get my big kind of content area where I can type any text that I want. And then I have these little zones where I've got my controls and so on. And anyone who's been using SharePoint in the past will look very similar to it. It's nice and easy. I can kind of move things around. So if I want my documents to actually be over on this side, I can drag it up there and then hit publish. And it will have moved and changed to the other side and so on. So very easy to use, very simple for non-IT people to start targeting this content out to people. My documents now in the left column. So I want to swap to the public website that Amy showed earlier and do a little bit more in the editing experience. So this is a very lightweight branded kind of brochure website that we've mocked up. There's a little bit of text, we've got some videos embedded from YouTube, and a few other kind of pages with some content in. The About Us page is nice and blank, so I'm going to drop this into edit mode. And I'm going to go to Word and take a chunk of text from Word. And I know normally when you're kind of editing web content, it's going to be a little bit scary. And it usually takes a lot of the horrible words out of it. But they've put in some new features, so it kind of gets rid of all the horrible words out and keeps the important things. So this top line, which is bright red, it's heading 1. So you can ignore the styles, but it's just been tagged as heading 1. And this one is normal, but it's inline styles. Down here I've got heading 2. And I also have a table. And I've copied that, I paste it in here. It takes in the content. And it keeps the fact that this is heading 1, and it keeps the fact that this is heading 2, but it applies the styles that this site has. So it drops the bright red and the orange and so on. It drops the inline styles here, gets rid of all the horrible word stuff. I've got a table down here, none of the styles that go with it. So it's kind of taking your web content and making your web content very, very easy. And if any of these I want to kind of change this to be a quote or an emphasis. All these styles here can be configured to be your brand, so that they're right font, they're right colours, they're the right size, and so on. You can also disable this chunk here, so you can make it that people can't do right big size 30 comments text in the middle of your website, so you can control exactly what people can do and just apply these predefined styles that mean that it's sticking with your brand. The same goes with the table. If I click down the table, the ribbon will pop up with the new tabs. And under here I have predefined styles suits the brand, so you can make sure it's going to match and so on. So it's quite easy to get the content in from other areas. If you want to type it in, obviously you can do that as well. Got some nice features like undo, spell check, all that kind of comfortable word feeling, so people feel like they're in a safe area. If I wanted to set an image, I've got lots of kind of options about different things I'm going to put in here, but I'm just going to pick an image. And it's one that's already uploaded to SharePoint, and I'm just going to grab that and put it into the site. So when I put this in, this is a very large image that was taken from a digital camera. It's about 3 meg in size, it's a big image. And if I save this page now, even if I grabbed this and resized it and made it a little image, it would still, a calculated page, it would download a 3 meg image. So one of the new features we have is renditions. And these are predefined renditions for the images. Every image that gets uploaded into the library will have these applied to it. So I can say, actually, I'm looking for this kind of long, thin one. And it will resize to that sizing. To put those ratio of size, but it will also shrink the image. So now this will just be a few K, just 3 meg. So it's all controlled centrally. So if I wanted to move this to a different part of the image was shown in that rendition, I do that centrally, and every page that's showing it will update and be able to show it. So it's a very nice way of kind of centrally controlling it. You also have the ability to kind of drop in videos and that sort of thing, and lots of other kind of different types of content that you want to put in there. I'm going to just save and publish that. You could have approval processes on here, so it kind of kicks up an approval. I'm just going to publish that straight away. And then we're going into directions area. So I have a page here ready for my directions, my address, and I want to put the map in. I put the Greenport postcode. So you can go to any kind of Google or Bing Maps and that sort of thing. You can go to YouTube and go embed text. There's lots of features that do this kind of the embed text for within sites. You can make kind of a little bit of configuration and so on, and then generate code. And that gives you a chunk of embeddable text. I can now go back in here. One of my insert options is embed code. Paste in that code. Insert. Drop my map in there. Publish that. There's my map, and it's fully zoomable. It's kind of focused in on where Paul's offices are, and I can now treat it as if it was a proper map within Bing. So very, very easy to take those sort of things and embed it directly in. And again, this obviously we're using Bing. We're in this building, we have to, but you can do it with any of the other tools that are out there. There's some other really nice improvements over the 2010 features, so things like search engine optimization, particularly for websites. Really easy now to find available off the site menu. You have here you've got your SEO properties. You can control your properties for any of those pages and make sure that's available. You can also, there's some new features around navigation. So I've got my different pages here, and instead of kind of going behind the scenes in the settings area and tweaking them, I can kind of put it into edit mode. I can drag and drop, move them around, rename them, hide them. So if I hide the directions page, hide the services one, and then hit save. It also kind of save and update, so it's kind of very inline, easy to do, and you can do that for things like the footers and so on. So register them in line where they're meant to be, rather than hidden away in settings pages. I hope it's kind of giving you a bit of a feel for the editing features that we've got, and kind of the content control. Any questions on that editing experience before we move on?
Sorry, can I just ask, on the website, are they automatically adapted? Is it, how does that work if you're using standing on the tablet, for example?
The out-of-box look will resize and that sort of thing, but if you're doing your custom branding, it's up to you to make sure it still works. The good thing is it's built to support it, so you can either do very responsive design where you shrink it and it will just change dynamically. But one of the new features that's available is device targeting, so you can actually have a completely different feel. If you're not coming in on a phone, you're coming in on a tablet, you can change the navigation and so on, same content, but it will automatically pick up the device and change the look. So that's kind of opened up more doors for you that as well.
one quick question. The way in which you've designed there is all sort of pre-deployed out into SharePoint. How would you go about getting that as a source, as a deployable content?
So is that kind of going for a public website, so somewhere safe?
Well, I mean, to design a site like that, you end up with the site being the site. You don't end up with any source for that site. So how would you can't design in the nice way that you've done there and then still have that as a deployable solution?
There are some nice features. So you can either do it from scratch in Visual Studio and actually build it as a deployable solution. It just takes a little bit longer. It's not quite as nice and UI. There are some nice features under the Design Manager, where if you built your brand, you've built your look and feel, you've configured your style sheets and so on, you come in here and actually export it and say, this is my package, export it, give me the source files, and then you can take that to any other file and read it.
Yeah,
So
okay.
that's very much the look and the feel of it. Content's slightly different. You can do the content in a couple of different ways, so content publishing or just kind of backups of the database and doing it that way, but the content is meant to live in SharePoint. But the design and all those features are now exportable and will give you a design package that you can take anywhere and it's also control and
Okay.
It's a really good question. It's the first release where that problem's been solved. Again, our designers, and we've got a couple of designers at core, that's all they do. They do UI and front end. There's lots of groups, and they started playing the first release saying, our life has changed. And they run there's two guys who run particularly the breakfast balance of design and how you do it, how you configure it. So mixtures of marketing view on design to a technical view. He covers that in an hour. It's a very good session. Okay, so the last section on share that we want to cover is cross-site publishing. This is a bit of a complicated one to end with, but it's definitely worth just setting the concept, if I can, for a few minutes. If you are looking to use SharePoint as an instrument for knowledge management, heavy content where you're delivering articles and so on, and you're trying to deliver those. If you're doing SharePoint as a website, where you're looking at lots of content and so on, this is a section that you know. Cross-site publishing is an absolute no-brainer. It's a pretty complicated set of tools that comes with 2013. It's a brand new feature, brand new set of features for 2013. But it's definitely knowledge management. I wouldn't say document management, but where lots of articles and content's been created in a complex structure. This gives us a whole set of new options to do that. But this is not the natural side. It's actually some of the original mock-ups we used, some of the original wireframes we used for a knowledge management system we built for a customer about a year or two ago. And the reason I want to show this is to give you an idea. What are you looking at on screen right now? You're looking at an article, a knowledge article in the middle, and it's actually, this is from a self-service help desk with millions of articles to help customers understand. You don't need to pick up the phone and call the help desk. You can go and find out how to do it yourself. So there's a number of search tools that they're using here. So I've clicked on the article, and you can see there's lots of sections, and there's some videos telling me what I need to do, and so on. But in terms of how did I get there, I could have done a search. But I also could have navigated. Now I'm going to show the navigation because the navigation is following actually how the content is structured. So here I have a hardware and a software section, and I have under software I've loads of notes, and then I have email, and I have signatures, and I have 3 articles that I could have clicked on. I'm clicking on the create folder signatures article. So from a purely structural point of view, what does that look like behind the scenes? So in SharePoint 2010, which this was built in originally, it's been converted as we speak, but in SharePoint 2010, you built your hierarchical content structure. So under each of these areas, if somebody said, well, we have under Lotus Notes, we have email, we have auto signature, and I want to do something else, you effectively build out another section, and you put your content in that section. It's not the end of the world, but you're creating a very physical structure to match. And there's a bit of training needed. It's not that it's doing anything bad, but it also means, what if that article really belongs also over here? Do I copy the article? Do I create a link? Do I have to do some clever navigation? It starts to get complicated pretty quickly. And it also means the content editors need, unless you customize in 2010, this is, content editors need to know that the structure exists, and that's where they create the article. Otherwise, the search and the navigation starts to fall apart a little bit. So, you know, from an end user experience, they wouldn't have known that there's nothing different from what we're doing. From a content creator and your editor experience, and that's one of the experiences we want to make sure is perfect. In this particular case, it's an international bank, and they have, in terms of content creators, something like 1,000 content creators in different locations around the world. And we wanted something that was very simple for them to build. We built them something, we did some heavy training. We did an analysis on cross-site publishing and what it would have changed, and the first key thing was usability. We can now simply and easily create content. So what is cross-site publishing? I'm going to base my example on a very simple example of cross-site publishing. Here we have a website. It's got a products area. Under products we do computers, we do phones, and we do audio. And for example, on the computers we show laptops, and we desktops, and we tablets, and so on. So here's a simple example. So what is cross-site publishing about? Like briefly, and not everybody ever see this, but if I briefly try and jot up what I'm talking about. Really, it's about creating content in buckets. So we create a content area. Where the phrase cross-site publishing comes in is that we create content anywhere in our SharePoint estate. So we could have a SharePoint farm that has servers in the US, here in the UK, and in Europe, and these all just become content catalogs. We just mark them as catalogs, and these lines that I'm drawing are just hundreds of articles. So now the content's put in a central source, and that's where people go when they want to create a new content. Down here we have hierarchical metadata. So this is maybe your content manager, maybe your knowledge manager creates this. It's literally a hierarchical list of meta tags. And what cross-site publishing does is it takes the two, joins them together, and creates on-the-fly navigation. So we now have virtual navigation. So the site, we only create a physical site to a level. After that, cross-site publishing actually builds the site for us on the fly. And that means we can have content appearing in different areas. We create the content once, it appears in different areas automatically. And the exercise means that the user doesn't really need to know. SharePoint handles that for you. It also handles a number of the kind of challenges that we would have had in the past. So how does that kind of look in practice? Okay. So the first point I wanted to make is that in this version of SharePoint, you create your structure to a level. So we might create the first high level, so I might go to the products. If you remember my diagram a second ago, I had loads of stuff on the products. But now I create a products page, and that's the last physical page I'm creating. Under this, there is no further structure under here. All of the content's been created on the fly by SharePoint for us from this point on. So here's the root of my products page. And this effectively is called a display template. Again, a brand new feature in SharePoint 2013. And our design team went crazy when they saw this. They thought the flexibility it gives them in terms of how they can create templates and views so that they can then deliver that to clients to extend themselves. Fantastic. So this is a display template. So what's on there? First thing is we have a main page. So main categories.aspx or products in this case. As soon as I click on this page as a user, it automatically knows I'm on one of these main pages. It connects to the right level of the navigation, and it builds the navigation. So everything you see in my navigation hierarchy doesn't exist. SharePoint has just created that for me on the fly. So I now have a navigation based on the tags. If somebody wants to add a new structure or change things around, they literally come in here and say, actually this subsection belongs in here. They move it, next time the page refreshes, SharePoint looks like it's had a structural change. It has it's just the taxonomy, the metadata that's changed. We then have friendly URLs. This is probably from an SEO perspective a really, really important point that, you know, if anybody's tried to build those complex structures in 2010, by the time you're down at the bottom of an article, you've got one of the longest URLs you've ever seen, pretty complex looking, very unfriendly in terms of even just passing around internally, but also search engines hate it. So if you're delivering a product-based website and, you know, your TVs and audios are at the bottom of a pretty ugly URL, somebody who's not using SharePoint is going to get higher on the SEO. So it was a very big problem. Now it truncates the URL, makes it much more friendly, and more importantly, from my point of view, it also is SEO friendly in that even though these pages don't exist, when a crawler or when a Google or a Bing hits your site, the cross-site publishing feature recognizes that and says, here's the navigation that virtually exists, or passes out a set of navigations that virtually exist, so it's building that on the fly. And again, it allows content editors to create and manage this as they go. So what does this look like if I click on camera? So I've clicked on the camera button, and immediately what SharePoint's doing is it's going into my pots of documents and saying any document that matches the criteria of camera, bring it back to me, and bring it back to me in a particular order. In this case, it's actually bringing back 6 different articles and showing you in a preview mode. This is one of the display templates, and there are hundreds of them that allow us to change this around. What SharePoint's actually doing is searching. This is content by search is the main function that sits behind this. Searching for this content and bringing it back in a format. If I change filter and I click on computers, so I've changed from cameras to computers, all that's happening, so from my user perspective, I've changed URL, exactly the same things happen. It now is pulling just the computers from the list. And a subtle feature, and I think I have it on the next slide, is as part of the metadata, we can tell it what additional filters we want. So in this case here, I've got phones. For phones, we should have a subcategory called color. So SharePoint will automatically know that I'm creating content and I can sub-filter this content. So it's building a lot of additional functionalities with color and price here, putting all of this in the metadata field and it's part of a sub-filter. It does the same for computers, and so when I click on the computer page, the page completely redesigned itself and it says screen size is what I should be filtering on. So it allows us to create a very, very flexible structure without each single template. In the previous example, when I talked about the bank, every time we had a different look and feel and a view, we were creating brand new pages. So some of the complexity that was in there has completely been removed. We did an analysis on the previous knowledge management system in terms of how we created the structure and content to how we would do user cross-site publishing, and we would have reduced the project size by about 50%, and that was very significant in terms of implementation times. I'm not sure if they were happy to hear that, but ultimately the benefit to them, and they have moved, and we're doing a complete change to cross-site publishing on the new release, is that it's much easier for content editors. And to give you a view of how it can look, here's a number of different. So this is display templates. There are so many display templates that you can create a very different look and feel. I mean, this is just a very basic article display template, one that you've seen already. These are all out-of-the-box templates that you can use and change the staff. Complicated feature, those who are looking at knowledge management and so on, I definitely think it's one we should take offline and talk about how you would use it. It's certainly something you should use. We ourselves on our own website, when we're looking at the redesign, it's just opening a number of really cool features for both us as content editors and for the end user. So I will, for those that are interested, I'll take that offline.
The organised, said at the beginning, it's really around your own content management. So it's looking after your content and how you can control it and manage it. It's around the collaboration and kind of working with other people. And then we've got the Office web apps, which we touched on. So diving into this a little bit more, these are the what's new bits, the features that have changed since the last version. Enterprise content management, the biggest thing around that, the biggest thing about the change in SharePoint really, is the usability. The basic concepts of what the product is the same as it was in 2010. The way people can use it, the way you can get things done is much, much better. So under the ECM part, you've got things like drag and drop. You can get your documents in there very, very easily. Just allow that much more intuitive use by users. Inline editing, which we'll show in the live demo, how you can kind of edit the columns and the content very, very easily. Site mailbox, great new feature. Again, we'll do that demo of that after the break. One small caveat on that, it is a very good way of connecting your SharePoint document libraries with an Outlook mailbox and managing them from Outlook. It works very, very well, and I'll show you the full demo of how to sync. The downside is, as well as SharePoint 2013, you need Outlook 2013 and Exchange 2013 to make it work. So if you go for the on-premise option, it is a full migration or upgrade internally. If you're going online, obviously you'll get all those in part of the suite. Sharing, again, that kind of the ability to easily share content with other people, both internal and external. And then SkyDrive Pro, so it's kind of bringing your content offline so you can manage it easily in the offline world. Collaborations, lovely new features around project management. So there's a new project template. Again, we'll show that after the break and really dive into the different components of what that will offer you. And you kind of can see this work management feature that is an ability to manage your tasks for multiple projects across the SharePoint farm. So rather than having to go to each site to see your task list, it's now managed centrally, much better way of managing it. And the Office web apps. So there are some key changes functionally to how they're delivered and how they're implemented. The main thing is how integral they are. So you've already seen a couple of examples of C4 throughout the morning. They are throughout the SharePoint hierarchy to be able to preview the documents and see what's in them before you open them, edit them if you have the right licenses. So it does really start to bring the implementation to life, particularly around the search side of things. So I'm going to dive into the demo on the organise. So there are two different ways of managing content. By content, the share area, we're really looking at web content, so your pages, your articles, and so on. Now I'm looking at the document content, so looking at files and so on. So one of these is my document center. So we can go very controlled, very managed documents, looking at documents management, records management, and so on. Or we can also go very lightweight, and we just want people to collaborate and work together on documents. So this is the former example. So it's a document center. There are different categories of documents you can upload, called content types. So I've got documents, I've got reports, and I've got press releases. So they're my different types of content that I can put in here. And it's a very managed area. The benefits here is obviously you can control your documents, you can put a lot of stuff around it to look after and make sure they're looked after. But it does kind of slow people down and so on, so you need the right balance of what you're offering to them. In terms of the usability, we've mentioned the ellipse before, so we've got a couple of different views here. I click on the ellipse, I can see more views and more things that are going on. I've got my view that I've got here, which is my old documents. Again, all the documents are listed. I get the key information that's been set up in this view, but I get the little ellipse. So under here, I see my preview, so it's doing that the web apps connection again. So I'm seeing the key parts of my Excel document, and then toggle through the different charts and the different tables. I've got the really important information, the stuff that I need to know about this document first. So things like who changed it last, who's it showing, who has access to this file. The URL, we mentioned being able to get hold of the URL nice and easily. That's it there. So if I wanted to go and put it into my newsfeed, I would just copy that and drop it in. So it's very, very easy to get hold of that sort of stuff. I can edit it in Excel, share it. So again, we'll show that a little bit later, but how easy it is to share it with more people. And then follow, which will then mean as soon as the document gets changed, I'm told about it in my newsfeed, so it's bringing it back in there. And again, when you have the ellipse, the more options, and that will give me the more typical, kind of view of the world, your properties, your workflows, the things you'll be used to if you've been using SharePoint for a while. And if I dive into the view properties for this document, it's a type document, so it's the lightweight one. All I get is kind of 3 fields. I don't really have much information about it. I did the same thing for one of my report. Go into view properties for that. You see my report actually has more columns around it and more fields. So I actually have things like owner and status and category and so on. So the ability to have additional metadata depending on the type of content you're uploading. And then go to here and grab some documents. So I've got Windows Explorer open here, some few files that I want to upload and get up. There's a number of different ways of uploading, and you've got your typical kind of add a new document, upload a document, the old Windows Explorer view and so on. But you now have the drag and drop, so as soon as you move it over there, it will automatically pick it up, and it will give you the bar as it's progressing, and then it says complete, and that's it, and it's uploaded. It's very, very easy to get it up there. If you have a very managed site like this, and you have mandatory metadata fields, particularly if you have different types of content, it's picked my default one, which is document, so you need to just control them and make sure it's managed correctly, so that if you do a drag and drop, it's going to be the right content type and the right default values in the metadata and so on. So I mentioned kind of a more lightweight, easy to use version, and I'm going to go to one of our project sites. So this is, I mentioned the project template. I won't go into any details about this just now, because we'll show it in much more detail after the break. Down here I've got my documents area, and this is kind of the lightweight option. So it is just a document library. There's documents and very simple views. again, you've got the drag and drop, so take batch that already exist and upload them. You'll see kind of a little swirly, and then tell me when they're done. So it is nice and quick, very, very easy to get them off there. There's also, in terms of kind of being able to find a file, by default you'll have a search bar on the library now. So instead of up here, I now have it kind of in this library area, so I can just search for my my documents within the area. And if I do add a new document, it can be configured that instead of doing an upload as default or just having the Word document as default, I can have different types on kind of pick which document I have started. In terms of kind of the things like the compliance, the workflows, all exactly the same, no real changes. You can have custom workflows, you can tie into retention and expiration rules, so you can be pulling in certain documents must be kept for 7 years, other documents must be used after 2 years, and kick off workflows after a certain period to make sure that things are kept up to date. All that's configurable and definable down here. And in terms of kind of the sharing, we've talked a lot about the ability to do external sharing. So when I click the share button, I get the option to share with somebody else. And these people already have access, and this is around permissions, people who actually can access the file. I can put somebody in here, and even if they have access, we can still send an email with a link saying there's a document you should be aware of. So they might have access to it, but not know about it. If they don't have access, they'll get added to the group, and they'll join this group of people. But as well as doing people that are in the site already, so that's kind of looking at my repository of users and bringing them in. I can also just type in somebody's email address, say whether they can edit it or view only, actually whether they need to sign in. And if I turn that off, they'll come in as a guest user with a big link. So that also I kind of send the email out to them, and you can really send people in. That little bit there, that kind of being able to send emails out to external people who come in with an account or without, that's the online only feature that you could do on premise, but you need to kind of build the feature to do it yourself. So that's an online only. So in terms of kind of looking after your documents and the sort of the management of it, it really is, or rather the changes really are around the usability, how easy it is, how comfortable people are editing files, finding files, being able to see very easily what is in the file before you open it and so on. So that's kind of covered up most of the document side of things. We have the other part I mentioned is collaboration, so there's kind of team sites and project sites, which James is going to touch on briefly.
So, as Philip alluded to, this is something we're going to cover in a lot of detail in the whole day in the life is structured around engaging on a project or an initiative, a campaign between a number of entities. So project working or client working and so on is fundamentally a huge new feature in 2013. They've taken a lot of concepts and components and put them into a really usable set of tools. And the overall name for this is workplace management. And if we're really simplify what this is about, it's taking task management and making it work. If anybody's tried to use simple workflow in SharePoint 2010 or create elements of workflow where you're delivering tasks, I think one of the first questions we always get is, where are my tasks going? And if anybody's had that experience, it's, does workflow and task management work in 2010? Yes. Is it an intuitive experience? No. So there's a lot of work being done on that, and it itself has become a complete set of features called workplace management. So if I go to something that Philip already showed a second ago, so a project site, and again we'll be showing these after the break. So we have, up here we have a Gantt view, and there's some tasks going on. If I click on them, I can look at the tasks. So now I'm on the project site, and I can see all these tasks. So after the break, we'll talk about how really neatly this works with something like project. So the need for things like project server are still there, but you can use some pretty cool project manager level interactivity as well as a normal user who is not using project. Again, we'll cover all this after the break, but again, for us, our project managers all use project. The rest of the teams who are delivering don't on a day-to-day basis, but they can get in and get views and interact with everything in this this is on a project basis. I'm sitting in a project site, I'm looking at the projects. That's one view, and that's a good view. But what I really like, and what I think is the key feature, is that that's now all been centralized into one area. So I go back to my newsfeed, and I go to tasks. I now have a central view of all tasks that are going on. So if I get a task, it gets delivered to this location. And I can view tasks in a number of different views. I can do my default view being important and upcoming. It gives me this timeline, and Phil will talk about the timeline after the break, but I have a very clear timeline that I can manage. What are my important tasks? Here are tasks that are coming for me. I can look at active tasks, completed tasks. More importantly, I can start filtering down on the projects. Now, we do a lot of test examples here, so it's probably more on here than would be in a normal real-world example, but I'll look at Project Phoenix, and it will only just show me the tasks that are ongoing for that. The key point is I get it in one location, but not only do I now get it in this location in my central site, I get it in Outlook, and it's completely automatic. In Outlook 2013, any tasks that put in into SharePoint through a project plan will automatically filter straight into Outlook. So great, I now have in my Outlook. I also, if I'm using SharePoint newsfeed, which we all do on our Windows phones, so I highly recommend the Windows phones, I also get it on my newsfeed, so instantly I'll get a new task. So as you'll see an example later, Philip will upload a project plan, automatically allocate me 6 or 7 tasks, and in one hit I get a little newsfeed updates, and I get my emails, and I get my task list, so they all appear in one place. I think if there's one negative, is there's no avoiding tasks anymore. You can't say I didn't get it or it was hidden somewhere, because you get it in every medium. So in terms of business process and using SharePoint in your key line of business, it's a set of tools that you can use straight out of the box. We have upgraded our project sites for all the recent projects we've done in the last few months, all using this, and we haven't to do this. Other than configuring it, not a single thing actually do we have to do. It works straight out of the box for our needs. We'll show more after the break on that. Okay, so Discover. Discover is the last kind of key functional section per se, and really, if you look at the hierarchy of where we've been, we've talked about sharing and creating content, talked about organising and ensure it's structured properly, and whether this is the right order or not, this is really now about saying we've created loads of content, we've got it structured correctly, how do we get value from it? And really, there's lots of stuff that technically now belongs under the Discover banner in 2013. But for us, if all we show you in this section is search, then I think we've done our job for today, which is the search feature and how you can get to content. An awful lot of the user interface and UIs that you can use in SharePoint 2013 are actually search orientated. Whether the end user knows that we've used search to create that experience is irrelevant. Search works, it works quickly. Those of you who might have used earlier versions would have known there can be kind of a lag between when the index happens and so on. All of that's been massively enhanced so that content is real time using the search engine. So we'll focus pretty much on search for the next set of demos. There is a new feature which, time permitting, we might get to touch on it briefly today, which we think is a really, really cool feature, and it does tend to get into the top 10 features when people list kind of what's new in 2013. That's the communities feature, and it's an extension of news feeds, I would say blog posts, but discussion forums and so on, bringing those into probably a set of features that already existed, being enhanced slightly and put into one product set. So bringing people together to share ideas. We use it very heavily from a knowledge management. We're starting to use it now as part of our managed service. And all of the content we create based on topics, we now have a full managed service, a full system that supports that. And in the next couple of months, we're going to start exposing that information out to our end customers so they can come in and see, how do I's and so on, all through the communities feature. So fantastic feature, again, a straight out of the box feature. BI belongs, business intelligence and management information belongs under this, so creating tools to allow us to do MI is under here. Audit control management, I talked about earlier, that's that managing of Excel and Access. And e-discovery really is focused from SharePoint, but it's across the complete Office 365 and Microsoft estate. So being able to do e-discovery across your Exchange servers and across your SharePoint estate in one tool now is driven through SharePoint, but it's across the platform. Don't really focus too much on that today from a time point of view, but just to note that is a feature that's brand new in 2013 across the complete platform. So legal holds, all that kind of high-end document management and records management can now be delivered through SharePoint and across the set.
Okay, so in terms of demoing search, there are some really nice kind of abilities to make search really sync and make it very, very powerful for you. So as soon as I start typing, there's kind of two things that are happening here. First is these two listed. These are the organisation, everyone that's using the search, and what they're doing, what they're getting up to. And it's if people are searching for the same term quite often and clicking on links off the back end, then it's going to start building up a kind of query suggestions for me. So that will grow and learn as people are using it, and you'll see more that's happening. But it's across the organisation. This one down here is a little different, and this is saying when you searched that term before, you clicked on this link and you've done it a few times. So maybe you're just trying to find the same document again. Maybe you're actually just after this file. So I'm going to give a shortcut to that file straight away. So I don't need to run the search. I'm finding my results that I found, me personally, useful in the past. I'm actually just going to run the same marketing search. And the results, I get the shortcut again here. I get my work or scopes in the older version, but they're now result sources at the top. Kind of looks like your normal search results. Some of the key things to remember, things like my thumbnails are now popping up, and then the pop-out menu. So a few nice new things here. As I hover over these files, I will get the pop-out menu. And this is one of those display templates. So this, what's shown on here and what we're seeing, completely different. So it's all HTML. You can change it if you want. I get my web apps again, so you can see the inside of the file. I get the top number of views, so how often people are opening it and looking at that document. I get these bits. These are part of the either enterprise or plan 2, the higher end version of SharePoint. Everything else you're seeing here is the lower version. But these are called deep links, and they're basically look at the content of the file. And I could click on this file and I could open it, and then I could scroll through and find what I'm looking for. But if I'm looking at this and saying, well, actually, I'm really interested in emotional connection, and that's what I'm after within this document, I click on that, it will open the file for me. It will take me to the emotional connection slides, and jump me straight to that point, to the bit that I'm interested in. So I don't even need to actually scroll through to find it. And the same happens with Word documents. So these are the sections within the document. I can scroll through and kind of say, well, yeah, this is the one I'm really after. So I want to have a look at milestones. That will open the document for me and shoot me down to the milestones area. So very, very powerful to kind of get you to the bit that you're interested in without having to worry about where it is in the file. But that's the only real bit that we're looking at right now that is in the enterprise or alternative option. You've also got kind of the key things. Again, it's around giving you those key bits of information that you need around documents and search results. So I can edit it, follow it, so I get alerts, send it to somebody. So if I want somebody to come and see this and someone will send them the link. Or I can view the library, which I think is a really lovely feature. So I found a document, I think it's going to be really useful. Where does it live? What lives with it? Where's the content that's wrapped around it? I can now jump straight to the site that's actually in and rather than the document itself. I can also start filtering, so I might know that I'm actually looking for an Excel document. I'll filter my results, so only bring back Excel documents, and I'll get that same kind of preview and so on. I've got kind of who authored it, different types of content, and the tags that people have been doing. So if you started tagging content, I can filter by those. And you can also have your own custom refiners here. So if you have your own metadata, your own taxonomy that you're applying to things, you can get them shown up in the refiners with filtering like values that are useful to you. You've got people results, which we'll show a little later, so I'll skim over that. Conversations, we've touched on the communities feature. This is really around kind of asking questions, getting answers and so on. And the conversations looks at newsfeeds, it looks at communities, it's kind of bringing back the conversations people are having and what's going on. So if I find one that's useful, there's one here. So a post has been asked, a question's been asked, there's been 3 replies. One of them was flagged as the best reply. So as I hover over it, I see the question and I see the best reply. So that's kind of my question and answer coming back. If I want to see the chain of conversation that led to that, I can view the discussion and see the full chain. It's really about kind of exposing that knowledge that the discussions are having on the organisation. And then I've got videos, which is just filtering by particular type of content and slightly different display templates that you can see the videos and you can kind of watch them play online. You can see the nice network connection play. They should click and play so I can watch my videos online and so on. Going back to the main search area. So on the very, very clever, very configurable. Something called query rules. So if I put in a search for the marketing deck, what SharePoint's saying, or rather what it's configured to say, is if somebody searches for the term marketing deck, you're not actually searching for the term marketing deck. Nobody writes that in a document. What you're looking for is a PowerPoint slide deck that's got the term marketing in it. So it's taken this result block at the top, this grey line. It's actually removed the keyword deck and got rid of that. Limited PowerPoint slide decks for the word marketing, and then it's just bringing back that. So it's changed my search for me and pushing those results. If I was actually after the word marketing deck, they'd have in, so I can still get to them. But it's doing some really clever things that we're entering. And we've done some scenarios around this where people were wanting to change the results. So they had a way of prioritising all their content that was high, medium, and low. And they wanted, no matter what you search for, all the high ones to appear at the top. So when we had a nice little result block for all the high ones, so rather than having to filter by complete, they would just push to the top. You can do it with different people. So if you're in HR, you'll get targeted with different result boxes on than you are if you're in marketing. So all of this is very configurable. It's all done through the front end, so you don't need to be developers to do it. A little bit of training on how the query rules work. It's really kind of taking that simple free text search and doing something very, very clever with it. And obviously you can do slightly better versions of it, so you can put in EPT and that sort of thing. But how you pick it up and how you can change the results to do, very flexible and very capable. And it really is being able to take that to the next level. And one of the key things that I'm particularly loving about search. Does that kind of, is there any more questions around the search thing? I know it's kind of, particularly the query rules, quite a big topic. Any more particular questions around that? So the last little thing we want to cover before the break was the build piece. So as I said at the beginning, it is very high level, not going really go into any details, no demos around it, so that I'll show you a couple of images. But it's really around taking what SharePoint gives you and doing more. So there is a new development methodology. You can connect to your backend database, so you can do that just as easily as you could in 2010. You've got the ability to do forms using Influence and how you can kind of build custom forms for things very, very powerfully. New workflow stuff, which we'll touch on in a second, and then some things around the branding and multilingual stuff. So first off, the development methodology. So it's called the app framework. Everything is an app. It started with your iPhones and so on and the App Store, but it's now everywhere, and it's also in all the Office products and it's in SharePoint. So if you want an add-in, if you want an extra set of templates, if you want to build a weather widget or something like that, it's an app, and there is an app store. You can buy things, there's some free ones, but when you're writing your own custom development for SharePoint, the best practice option is now to build apps, and they live their own little world, they're running separately, but they look like they're part of SharePoint, they're run in the SharePoint world. Lots of technical benefits the way you do it that way, but it also means you can publish them out to the App Store, you can make them available, but you write a piece of code, you publish it to your internal App Store as well as the public one. And then somebody might spin up a project site, completely separate area you know nothing about, but they can go to the company App Store and say, well, I want this level of control or this level of control and so on. So it's very, very easy to manage. And it basically, because you're taking it out of SharePoint, the development is much easier. You just, as long as you're developing my app, you don't really need to know that much about SharePoint. And translations, there is, you've got the same kind of multilingual variants that we had in 2010, but there's some really nice features now where it can automatically machine translate your pages. So if you have a site that's set up that English is the master and you've got French and Spanish as well, you write your page in English, as soon as you save it, it will push it off into Bing Translate by default, but you can change the translation engine, bring back the translated text, create your French and Spanish pages and plug the translation in, and then pick up a workflow for humans to actually sanity check it and make sure it's readable. But it's doing a big chunk of the work for you, so some really nice features around that. Branding, we touched on the design manager earlier, so much easier way of getting the brandings done, getting it put in there, and then controlling it, taking it back out and managing it. So one of the things that our designers absolutely love is you can can now map a drive to where your design files go, and you can manage the new design tools like Dreamweaver and that sort of thing. You don't need to use SharePoint tools anymore. You don't need SharePoint Design or anything to brand your site. Do it all with Dreamweaver, do it in HTML. You don't even need to know about SharePoint. A little bit of wiring up within the design manager, and they can be managed completely separately. So it's very, very powerful. And then the device channels is what I mentioned earlier around targeting your different devices. So you can have one for iPads, one for a Windows phone, one for an Android phone, and then you open it on that device what it looks like, what it's like. Very different than what you want to do. And then finally, workflow. There is now a completely new workflow engine. Again, it kind of has been removed from the SharePoint area, creating a very enterprise way of managing workflows. The nicest user benefit is that it's now visual creation, so it's much like Visio. Within SharePoint Designer, you drag and drop, nice little controls and so on, much better HTML experience. But it also means from a management point of view, you can see all your workflows, you can control them centrally rather than in every individual site. So just I'm going to jump into my admin area. Sites. So I am on as an admin, and we've opened up the store, so I don't allow people to add things to the store. So if I go into my site and I look at my content, this is content already exists on here. If I wanted to add more, I click add an app. And the first page I get is your normal SharePoint stuff. So this is where you would add an introductory library, task list, contact list, and so on. They're now called apps. They are just lists and libraries, but they're still called apps. I have from my organisation area, and these are custom apps that we've written as part of our demo world and published. And I have a SharePoint store. And if I go into the store, I can see these are all the kind of the apps that are available. A lot are free. Some are payable, small amount, others are payable and quite expensive. But there's quite a few there. It's growing very quickly, not as quickly as I'd like, but it is growing, and this will continue to kind of get added to. When you purchase these, you can either purchase it as an outright license for free of cost and you own it and that's it, or some of them are per user. So let's see if this one is. Yeah, so it's $139, but just for me, I can say if I want more people and buy a number of licenses. And then from the kind of the management point of view, go back here, I can manage my licenses and make sure that if I bought 50, but I've got 100 users, who's using those 50 licenses, where are they going, and so on. So it's very manageable. You need to be aware it's there, so you can control it and make sure you don't have this completely open. And on a company credit card, people can start going and buying quite a lot of apps and stuff. So it needs a little set up at the beginning, but once it's there, it will very, very additional changes for how you manage it. So I think it's kind of covered, as we said, that the managed thing we won't really go into detail at all today. When we do have a breakfast bites, if you're interested, let us know and we'll tell you where the next one is. That's kind of the kind of main overview of the different blocks. After the break, we'll be going to our day of the live application. We'll be the scenarios, all the same features we talked about, everything you've already seen. We'll put the scenario in and make it a bit more real world and a bit more demo. So out where the breakfast was, there'll be coffee and snacks, biscuits or something. So if we can do that.
Yeah, about 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. We don't. We are going to the next one.